Diane at I Studio. It's been a minute, hasn't it? Anyway, I've got a lot of work in process right now. This work behind me, I have some over there. I'm going to walk you around. And what the project is today is sanding the surface. So I've got a lot of layers of paint and paper. Lately I've been working with paint, paper, and fabric. So what happens at a certain point is I build up a lot of layers of paint and paper and then I sand into it. And I'll show you the kind of effects that you can get by sanding into it. Then I'm going to show you how I sand. There's a couple ways we can do it with a hand sanding block. I prefer this. Looks like a little iron. It's cordless, really easy to use, and you can buy all different size sandpaper for it. This is a 40, so it's a pretty rough grit, depending on how much paper and paint I'm grinding through. Now this works best if you're working on wood panels. It can be done on canvas. You have to be very careful that you don't sand through the canvas, especially on the edges where the canvas is pressing on the wood. You go over that with the sander a little too much. It can go right through the canvas, and that's all she wrote. In that case, you probably want to use the sanding block with sandpaper. Okay, let me walk you around and show you some of the effects that you can get by sanding, okay? This is one that I'm going to sand into. So this is the before the sanding. You can see I have a lot of texture built up, but nothing too interesting as far as the paint application goes. Same with this one. This one I have done a little sanding. So you can see that as you sand, you're exposing what's underneath. And you can get some colors that come through. It's really nice. Here's some examples of the sanded surface. Absolutely beautiful. So some areas you don't want to sand. You want some quiet areas, like this white is so beautiful. If everything looks the same, then it just looks like noise. So you have to learn to quiet your painting down. And even sanding can create lines and noise. So the painting has to be a lot of contrast between dark and light, activity and no activity, saturated colors and diluted colors. There are a lot of ways to get contrast. And I'll tell you what I'm learning is that contrast in the paintings is the key to an exciting painting. And I'm going to show you an example over here. These are two paintings that I've actually been working on the same amount of time. They have about the same amount of layers, the same amount of paint versus paper. And what I mean by paper is I do a lot of collaging with rice paper and newsprint and other papers. Then I'll cover those collage bits up with paint. When you sand into the paint, you can get some interesting textures and some colors come through. But as I was saying, I'm really learning a lesson in contrast because the painting on the right has a lot of contrast, whereas the painting on the left doesn't. So the painting on the right is exciting, it moves, it floats, it has action, it has depth, and the painting on the left is rather flat. All the images are about on the same picture plane. We have a little bit of foreground, middle ground, and background, but not enough to make it an exciting piece. Whereas the one on the right, the black, or actually they're a dark blue, those shapes float forward The gray and the cream color are floating back. So you really see a separation between, say, the dark blue and the beige, with the dark blue floating forward. The white as well wants to come forward. So they're almost like drifting flowers or floating clouds. You get a really nice illusion of movement and space on the painting on the right. So I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of sanding, and that's it for today. Hang on. Okay, I'm going to sand this and see what's underneath. See if we get anything interesting coming up on the surface. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. What you want to do is you want to be sure that you have color and texture under the surface. Now that can be done with collage papers, or it can simply be done with paint. And when I sand, I always wear a respirator mask. And I'll tell you, you kick up a lot of dust. And another thing is, some of the paints that we're using are toxic, especially things like cadmium. So you don't want to be breathing cadmium dust into your lungs. So let me go ahead and put on my mask, and I'm going to turn on the electric sander. I had talked about a sanding block. This is a sanding block, and this works great, especially on canvas. I can see already some red color popping up here. I believe I had put some red flower stencils under the surface. So let me get my high-powered battery sander, and let's see what we can get. What I do then is I take a wide house painting brush and I brush all the dust off into a wastebasket because my process is very messy. I have one of the messiest studios. It was interesting, I was listening to a video by Squeak Carnwath. She was talking about how paints are really made up of dirt. You know, you've got all kinds of minerals and they're bound together with binders. But it's a very, very dirty process. There's no doubt about it. And it's funny how dirty the work surface and everything can get. And then when you're done with the painting, varnishing and all the things you do to make it pristine, the work looks pristine, like it lived in a museum. Sure didn't start that way. It's a messy, dirty process. So I am pleased with the surface. I've got a lot to work with now. This is by no means done. This is just a step in the process. but I had left some ridges in the paint when I put the coat on. I had troweled it on, and these lines were the high areas left after troweling. When I sanded, it revealed a darker line, which I was hoping for. So I have these dark lines to work with. I also have these red dots, which came as a result of painting red underneath. And another thing that's interesting, if you can see up here, I have a very aged looking surface. So sanding will age the surface as if you're working on a very old piece of wood, an old door, or something like that. And that's the beauty of sanding. It's just one step in the process, and now I have to look at what I have and to see what the painting requires, what it wants, what it needs. It's a process of making a move and then responding to the result that you get. All right, so that was fun, and I think we got some nice results. You never know for sure what's going to happen when you sand the surface. You want to just respond to the marks you get. Painting is a process of putting something down and then responding to what you see. Learn to develop your eye so that you can recognize what's working, what's not. It's always a dance between the artist and the paint. So pay attention to that, please. Many elements go into a good painting. And today we talked a little bit about contrast and a little bit about the results of sanding. So, like I said, I'm using paint, paper, fabric. I've done a lot of handmade brushes lately. I'm taking a workshop with Lorna Crane in Australia online. And she has us making brushes so that we can experiment with different types of mark making. And we're just not limited. We can do anything that we want. The key is to be able to see what you've done and to respond to it. Okay? Stay tuned. Please subscribe if you like my videos. Give me a thumbs up, and I appreciate your sharing and your tuning in. Take care and be safe.